The night I became homeless, it was raining so hard the streets looked like rivers. My suitcase, the same one that used to carry vacation clothes, now held my entire life. A few shirts, a half-empty perfume bottle, and a framed photo of my daughter. The raindrops blurred everything, the cars, the faces, the memories I was trying so hard not to drown in. People walked past me like I was invisible. And maybe I was. Because when you lose everything, you stop feeling real, like the world keeps moving, and you're just the static in between. 2 months earlier, I was living in a suburban home with white fences and perfect roses. I had a husband, a daughter, and a kitchen that smelled like Sunday pancakes. Now, I was sitting under a broken bus shelter, counting coins to buy a cup of coffee. I never thought love could destroy you like that. When Mark filed for divorce, he didn't just take the house, he took everything. My savings, my car, even the custody papers I didn't understand until it was too late. His lawyer was smarter. Mine never existed. He told the court I was unstable, that I couldn't take care of our daughter. And the judge believed him. Because I cried too much. Because I didn't look strong enough. When I tried to fight, he reminded me that the house was in his name. The car, too. Everything I built was just a shadow under his signature. So I packed what was left of me and left. My friends stopped calling. My parents said they were disappointed. I don't know which broke me more, the betrayal or the silence that followed. By the second week, I was sleeping in my car. By the third, I didn't have one. That night, I sat outside a 24-hour diner, shivering. The waitress, a girl younger than my daughter, looked at me with pity and brought me a cup of hot water. No tea, just water. I held it between my palms like it was the last bit of warmth in the world. A man at the counter watched me. Maybe he thought I was crazy. Maybe he was right. I didn't care anymore. When the sun came up, I walked to the park across the street. I sat on a bench, the same one I'd used years ago to feed pigeons with my daughter. A man in a navy suit was reading a newspaper nearby. I didn't notice him until he stood and started walking toward me. He stopped a few feet away, hesitant, like he wasn't sure if I'd run or crumble. "Excuse me," he said gently, his voice steady but careful. "Are you Sophia?" The way he said my name, like it still meant something, made my stomach twist. "Yes," I whispered. He paused, looking relieved. Then, quietly, he said words that didn't make sense. "Not at first. You just inherited $51 million. For a second, I thought it was a cruel joke. I almost laughed, the kind of laugh that hurts your throat. But then he showed me an envelope. Thick. Official. My name written across the front in blue ink. I stared at it, afraid to touch it. He said again, softer this time, "It's real, Miss Carter. I've been looking for you for weeks." The world blurred around me, the cars, the voices, even the sound of rain starting again. "From who?" I finally managed to ask. He smiled faintly, like he'd been waiting for that question. "From someone who thought you'd never believe it." The envelope trembled in my hands. I wanted to open it. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But all I could do was sit there, a woman who'd lost everything, staring at a future she never saw coming. And somewhere deep inside, under the fear and exhaustion, something small flickered back to life. Hope. My fingers hesitated on the edge of that envelope, afraid of what was inside, or maybe afraid that it wasn't real. The man in the navy suit stood there patiently, like he'd done this before. Like he'd watched disbelief 100 times. He spoke softly, "My name is David Keller. I'm a representative from the firm of Bennett and Howe. The letter will explain everything." I blinked at him, still clutching the envelope like it might vanish. "You're telling me someone left me $51 million? That's insane." "I agree," he said with a small smile. "But sometimes, life saves its biggest surprises for when we've lost the most." He handed me a business card, then turned to leave. I stopped him. "Wait. Who was it? Who did this?" He met my eyes. "Read it, Miss Carter. Then call me." When he walked away, I sat frozen. The park was quiet, except for the rain tapping against the bench. The world kept moving, people passing, buses groaning, horns echoing, but I couldn't hear any of it. I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter on thick paper, embossed with gold initials, RH. The handwriting was elegant, deliberate, familiar somehow. To Sophia Carter, it began. If you are reading this, it means I am gone. And it means the promise I made has finally been fulfilled. You don't know me, but I knew you once, a long time ago. You may not remember a boy named Ryan who lived 3 houses down from you in Willow Creek, but I remember everything. You were the girl who brought me lunch when my mother forgot to. You gave me kindness when I had nothing. I never forgot that. My heart stopped. Ryan Henderson. The name pulled a dozen dusty memories from the attic of my mind. We were kids. Neighbors. He was quiet, poor, often bruised from the chaos at home. My mom told me to stay away, but I didn't listen. I used to sneak sandwiches across the fence. When I was 16, he moved away. I never saw him again. I kept reading, my breath uneven. Years later, I built a company from the ground up. I found success, but not peace. Not until I remembered where it began, with a girl who believed kindness was free. You didn't owe me anything, but you gave me dignity when I had none. This inheritance is not charity. It's gratitude. I owe my life's fortune to that moment, to you. I stared at the page until the words blurred. My hands were shaking. I whispered, Ryan, oh my God. The letter ended simply, I hope this finds you when you need it most. Ryan Henderson. I pressed the paper to my chest. It smelled faintly of ink and old wood, the kind of scent that makes you feel like you're holding someone's ghost. I didn't realize I was crying until the tears hit the page. For years, I thought life had forgotten me. That I'd become invisible. But somewhere, someone had remembered. I spent the night in a shelter, my usual corner by the window, wrapped in a thin blanket. But this time, I didn't close my eyes in fear. I stared at the ceiling and whispered, thank you, Ryan. The next morning, I called David. He picked up on the first ring. I read the letter, I said. There was a pause. Then you know it's real. I don't understand why me. Sometimes gratitude finds us when we least expect it. Mr. Henderson left clear instructions. You're the sole beneficiary of his estate. I laughed through disbelief. Estate? I don't even have a home. You will soon, he said gently. Meet me tomorrow at our office. There are things we need to discuss. I hung up and looked at my reflection in the diner window. My hair was tangled, my clothes worn, but for the first time in months, I saw something new in my eyes. Possibility. The next day, I stood in front of a tall glass building downtown, the kind I used to pass on my way to work back when I still had one. The receptionist looked at me like she wasn't sure I belonged there, but when I said my name, her tone changed immediately. Of course, Miss Carter. Mr. Keller is expecting you. Her words felt strange, Miss Carter. It sounded like someone else's life. David met me in the lobby, a warm smile softening his corporate polish. Welcome back to the world, Sophia. He handed me a file. Inside were bank statements, property documents, and a list of holdings. All under my name. I stared at the numbers. Commas. Zeros. Too many to count. David said softly, You're a very wealthy woman, Miss Carter. What do you want to do first? I looked at him, my voice barely a whisper. I want to go home. The car door opened to a silence that didn't feel real. The long driveway stretched before me like a dream I didn't remember, having lined with oak trees and white lanterns that swayed softly in the breeze. At the end stood the house Ryan Henderson left me. My name was on the deed now. I stepped out slowly, gravel crunching under my worn shoes. The air smelled like rain and jasmine. The mansion wasn't some modern glass box. It was old, elegant, red brick walls, tall windows, ivy curling across the sides like veins. Beautiful, but haunted by quiet. When I reached the front door, David handed me the keys. It's been empty since Mr. Henderson passed, he said softly. He insisted everything inside remain untouched until you arrived. I turned the key, the heavy door creaking open. The scent hit first, cedar, old books, faint cologne. It felt like walking into a memory that wasn't mine. The foyer stretched wide, light pouring in through stained glass. On the wall hung a portrait Ryan, older, successful, his eyes just as kind as I remembered from childhood. My breath caught. He kept your picture, David said quietly, pointing toward the piano in the corner. I turned. On the piano sat a faded photograph, me, 15, laughing, holding a stray puppy. I remembered that day. Ryan had taken the photo before his family moved. I didn't even know he still had it. Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. He remembered everything. David nodded. Mr. Henderson never married. No children. He built his company, donated millions, but he never forgot where it started. With you. He placed an envelope on the table. His lawyer included this, his personal letter to you. There's also a will reading next week. You'll want to be there. I nodded, staring at the envelope as he left. The sound of the door closing echoed through the house, leaving me alone with my thoughts and his ghost. For hours, I walked through every room, touching the walls like they were pages of a book written for me. The library was lined with leather-bound volumes, the kind of place my younger self would have lived in. The kitchen still smelled faintly of coffee. His study had files labeled Henderson Foundation, filled with photos of schools, hospitals, charities he'd funded. Each one had sticky notes in neat handwriting. Some said, for her. The sun was setting when I found his bedroom. Everything was spotless, the bed made, a glass of water still on the nightstand. I sat down, clutching the letter David left. Sophia, it began. If you're reading this, it means I'm finally at peace. I never knew how to thank you in person, so I did the only thing I could. But this gift isn't meant to change who you are, it's meant to remind you who you've always been. Kind. Brave. The girl who gave even when she had nothing to spare. I wiped my eyes. You've been through hell, I know. But maybe this time, life owes you something good. Please use what I've left to live again, not survive, but live. And if you ever feel lost, there's a box in the attic labeled Sophia. You'll understand when you see it. My breath caught. I read it twice. Then I ran. The attic door was narrow, the wood creaking as I pushed it open. Dust floated in the golden light spilling through the small window. And there it was, a wooden box with my name written in black ink, old and faded. I knelt and opened it. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. All from Ryan. Each one sealed, dated, written over the years since he'd left Willow Creek. The top one read, 1999, the day I left. I opened it carefully. Sophia, I didn't say goodbye because I didn't know how. You were the only good thing in a place that hurt too much to stay in. Someday, I'll find a way to thank you. My vision blurred. Letter after letter, he'd written to me for decades, even when I never wrote back because I didn't know. He'd kept them all here. Waiting. And then, at the bottom of the box, one last envelope. No date. Just 4 words written in his careful hand, for when she's ready. I held it in trembling fingers, but couldn't open it. Not yet. Outside, thunder rolled across the hills. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel poor. I didn't feel lost. I just felt seen. But deep down, I also knew this inheritance wasn't just money. It was a message. And I hadn't heard the whole thing yet. I sat on the attic floor for hours, surrounded by decades of letters from a man I hadn't seen since I was 16. Each envelope felt like it pulsed with time, the handwriting changing over the years, the ink fading, but the voice behind it always the same. I opened another one, dated 2007. Sophia, today I bought my first office. It's small, but it's mine. Every time I get scared, I hear your voice telling me to try again. Funny, isn't it? That one act of kindness could follow me through every success and every failure. I hope life's been kind to you. I smiled through tears. If only he knew what life had really done to me. Another letter, 2013. The world thinks I'm a genius now. I laugh when they say that. Genius? No. Just a boy who wanted to prove a girl right. I keep a photo of you in my office. The one with the puppy. You smiled like you believed the world was still good. Sometimes, I look at it just to remember what that looks like. My heart twisted. I hadn't smiled like that in years. I reached for the next envelope but hesitated. The label read 2019, only 4 years before his death. The paper looked newer, his handwriting shakier. Sophia, the doctors say I don't have much time left. Funny how money buys everything except that. I've spent years building things, buildings, charities, companies, but all I ever really wanted was to give back the way you did for me. I hope, Wherever you are, you're still fighting. Don't let life turn you cold. My throat tightened until I couldn't breathe. The rain outside had turned into a full storm, thunder shaking the roof. I held the last unopened letter, the one that said, "For when she's ready." I wasn't ready. But I opened it anyway. The first line hit me like a whisper from the past. "Sophia, if you're reading this, it means you finally believe you deserve good things." I pressed a hand to my mouth, tears spilling over. This money, it's not a gift. It's a reminder. Use it to live, not to hide. Find your daughter. Rebuild what was taken. And when you can, help someone who's where I once was. That's how this story continues. I let the letter fall to my lap. For years, I'd believed I was broken beyond repair, a failure of a mother, a mistake of a woman. And now, through the voice of a boy I once shared sandwiches with, I was being told to forgive myself. The next morning, I walked through the mansion again, this time not as an intruder, but as someone reclaiming a piece of herself. The walls didn't seem so empty anymore. Every room carried traces of him, a man who had turned pain into purpose and loneliness into legacy. In the study, I found a drawer labeled "Pending Projects." Inside were checks addressed to orphanages, women's shelters, and addiction recovery centers. On one of them, in Ryan's handwriting, he'd scribbled, "For her to decide." My name wasn't there, but I knew what he meant. That evening, David Keller returned with paperwork for the estate transfer. "We'll finalize everything tomorrow," he said, placing files on the table. I nodded absently, my eyes fixed on the storm outside. He wanted this money to change lives, didn't he? David smiled. "Yes," he said, "if you ever found yourself lost, you'd know exactly who to help." I stared at him, a spark of resolve rising through the sorrow. "Then I think I do." David tilted his head. "Who?" I met his gaze. "Me. And every woman who's ever been where I was." He nodded slowly, a quiet respect in his eyes. "Then Ryan chose the right person." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my daughter, about the last time I saw her, the way she looked at me like I'd already lost. I whispered into the dark, "I'm coming back for you, Emma." Lightning flashed through the window, lighting the room like a promise. Because Ryan's final gift wasn't money. It was courage, the kind that doesn't buy happiness, but builds it. And somewhere deep in my heart, for the first time in years, I felt something steady. A purpose. The morning after the storm, the mansion was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like waiting. Sunlight slipped through the tall windows and fell across Ryan's letters scattered on the table. I ran my fingers over the last one again, tracing the words, "Find your daughter." For years, I'd avoided that thought. The shame of losing Emma in the divorce was heavier than any hunger or cold night I'd spent. Mark had convinced the court that I was unstable, incapable, that she was better off without me. And maybe, back then, he was right. I was broken. But not anymore. I stood in front of the mirror, hair brushed, a borrowed coat from the guest closet. I looked like a different woman. Not the one who slept in her car, but not quite the one I used to be. Someone in between. Someone rebuilding. When I called David, he answered on the first ring. "Ms. Carter, I have the transfer confirmation. The funds are officially in your name. You're free to access everything." His words still didn't sound real. $51 million. The kind of number that could fix any problem except the one that mattered most. "David," I said quietly, "can you help me find someone?" He hesitated. "Of course." "Who?" "My daughter." There was a pause on the line, long enough to make my heart ache. Then he said softly, "Send me what you remember. We'll find her." 2 days later, I sat in a sleek black car outside a private school across town. Children ran across the courtyard, backpacks bouncing, laughter echoing through the crisp morning air. And then, there she was. Emma. 13 now. Taller. Her hair longer, the same chestnut brown as mine. I pressed a trembling hand against the window, afraid to blink. David watched me quietly from the driver's seat. "You can approach her, if you'd like." I shook my head. "Not yet." He nodded, understanding. I sat there until the last bell rang, until she disappeared inside the building. I whispered to the empty air, "I'll come back, baby. When it's time." That night, I went back to the mansion, pacing through the echoing halls. Money, houses, security. None of it mattered if I couldn't face her. Ryan's letter echoed in my mind. Use it to live, not to hide. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I called Mark. His voice came through sharp and skeptical. Sophia? What do you want? I swallowed hard. To talk. In person. He laughed bitterly. You disappear for years, then suddenly you want to talk? Why no? Because I'm not the same woman you left, I said quietly. And because our daughter deserves the truth. Silence. Then a sigh. Tomorrow. My office. Noon. The next day, I walked into his glass-walled law firm, the same place I'd once brought him coffee when we were still newly married and dreaming of forever. He looked different, older, polished, tired. Well, he said, leaning back, you look healthy. I am, I said. And you look successful. He smirked. Some of us had to move on. I took a breath. I didn't come to fight, Mark. I came to forgive. His eyebrows rose. Forgive? For taking everything, I said softly. For making me believe I was nothing. You broke me, Mark. But somehow, that saved me. Because I had to rebuild from nothing, and now I know who I am without you. He stared at me confused. Why are you telling me this? Because our daughter deserves a mother who's not afraid anymore. He looked down, then back up. You can't just walk back into her life, Sophia. It's not that simple. I know, I said. But I'm not asking for permission. I'm asking for grace. He studied me for a long time, his expression softening just slightly. She's been asking about you lately, he admitted. She thinks you're somewhere far away, trying to get better. I blinked away tears. Maybe I was. When I left his office, the cold wind hit my face like a baptism. For the first time, I didn't feel small under it. I felt clean. That night, I sat at the piano in Ryan's living room. The same one that held my photo. I pressed a key, then another. A soft, broken tune filled the house, hesitant but alive. Money couldn't erase the past. But maybe, just maybe, it could help me build something new. And as I played, a thought came to me, clear, certain, unstoppable. I knew what to do with the inheritance. Not to keep it. To share it. Because maybe that was the point all along. The next morning, I stood on the balcony of the mansion, watching the sunrise paint gold across the valley. For the first time in years, I didn't feel afraid of what the day would bring. The world was quiet, not because I was alone, but because I was finally at peace. Ryan's letters were still spread across the table behind me, each one a reminder that gratitude doesn't die with the person who feels it. His words had started something I couldn't ignore anymore. I called David. I know what I want to do, I said. He didn't sound surprised. I was hoping you'd say that. What's your plan? I want to start a foundation, I told him. A place for women like me. Women who lose everything and have nowhere to go. Shelter, education, legal help, the second chance I never had. There was a pause on the line, the good kind, the kind that means someone's listening. Then David said, Ryan would have loved that. Over the next few weeks, the house transformed into something living again. Lawyers came and went, architects, accountants, all working to bring the Henderson Foundation for renewal to life. The name wasn't mine. It was his. Because everything I had started with him. When the day came to open the doors, the building was simple, not a tower of glass, but a home. A place that felt safe. The plaque out front read, for those who still believe in tomorrow. I stood in the entryway as the first women arrived, nervous, tired, broken in familiar ways. One of them looked at me and whispered, "You built this." I nodded. No, we did. Each story that came through those doors was a mirror of my own: lost jobs, custody battles, shelters, hunger. Every time I handed someone a key, it felt like I was unlocking a piece of my past. One evening, I walked through the common room and saw a mother reading to her little girl on the couch. The child's laughter filled the air, soft, pure, healing. It stopped me in my tracks. For a moment, I saw myself and Emma in them. And I knew what I had to do next. That weekend, I went back to the school. This time, I didn't hide in the car. I walked through the gate, my heart pounding like it was about to break all over again. The principal looked startled when I gave my name. "You're Emma's mother?" "Yes," I said, my voice shaking. Can you tell her I'm here? Minutes later, the door opened. Emma stepped out, clutching a backpack, her eyes wary. "Mom," she whispered. I nodded, tears already burning my eyes. "Hi, baby." She didn't run to me. She didn't smile. She just stood there, studying my face like she was trying to find the woman she remembered. "You look different," she said softly. "I feel different," I answered. She glanced down. "Dad said you were getting better." "I am," I said. "And I'm sorry, Emma. For everything. For disappearing. For letting fear take me away from you. I thought I was protecting you, but I was just hiding." Her chin trembled. "I used to think you didn't love me anymore. That broke me." I stepped closer, reaching for her hands. I never stopped. Not for a second. For a long moment, she just stared at me, and then, quietly, she stepped forward and hugged me. The world disappeared. All the years of pain, regret, and distance dissolved into that one embrace. When she pulled back, she wiped her eyes and smiled through tears. "Can I see where you live?" I nodded. "I'd love that." We spent the afternoon walking through the mansion. She ran her hands across the piano, the letters, the photos. When she saw Ryan's portrait, she asked, "Who's that?" I smiled. "A friend. The reason we're here." That night, after she fell asleep in the guest room, her head buried in pillows too soft to be real, I sat on the porch and looked at the stars. The world was quiet again, but this time it was full. Ryan's voice echoed in my mind. "Find your daughter. Rebuild what was taken." I whispered into the night, "I did, Ryan. I did." And in the stillness, I almost felt him there, not in the shadows, but in the warmth of everything he left behind. 6 months later, spring had settled over the valley. The air smelled like fresh rain and blooming magnolia. The mansion no longer felt like a museum, it felt alive. The Henderson Foundation had grown faster than I ever imagined. Women from every corner of the city had come through its doors, mothers, daughters, survivors. They arrived with nothing but fear and left with something priceless: hope. That morning, I stood in the courtyard watching volunteers plant a tree in the center garden. A small plaque at its base read, "For Ryan, who believed in the power of kindness." David joined me, hands in his pockets. "You've done something extraordinary here, Sophia." I smiled faintly. "We've done something extraordinary. You and Ryan made this possible." He chuckled softly. "Ryan may have started it, but you gave it a heartbeat." I looked up at the branches swaying in the wind. He taught me that sometimes, kindness comes back when you least expect it. Even years later. A car pulled up on the gravel drive. The door opened and Emma stepped out, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Her hair glowed in the sunlight, the same shade as mine when I was her age. "Mom," she called, waving. I turned and smiled. "You're early. I wanted to see the place again before school." She looked around, eyes wide. "It's even prettier in the daylight." I laughed softly. "You make it prettier just by being here." We walked through the main hall together. She stopped to look at a wall lined with photos, women who'd found new beginnings, children smiling in donated homes, volunteers working through the night. "Do you ever miss the old house?" she asked quietly. I hesitated. "Sometimes. But this," I gestured around us. "This is where I was meant to end up." I just didn't know it then. She looked thoughtful. "Dad said you changed." "I did," I said. "But not because of the money. Because someone believed I could." Emma smiled faintly. "Ryan?" I nodded. We ended up in the library, the same room where I'd first read his letters. Emma traced her fingers along the shelves. "It's weird," she said. "He didn't even really know you." "He knew enough," I replied. "Sometimes people see who we are long before we do." I opened the last letter again, the one I kept framed on the desk. "Use it to live, not to hide." "Mom," she said softly, "do you think he knew you'd find me again?" I smiled through the tears. "I think he hoped I would." Later that afternoon, the foundation hosted its first community event, a fundraiser for women's shelters across the state. The courtyard filled with laughter, music, and stories. I stood at the podium, the microphone trembling slightly in my hand. When the applause faded, I took a breath and began. 6 months ago, I was living on the streets. I had no family, no home, and no hope. I believed that life had ended for me. But then a stranger found me, a man I once knew only as a neighbor. His name was Ryan Henderson. He left behind not just a fortune, but a lesson. The crowd was silent, listening. He taught me that kindness never disappears. It may sleep for years, but it wakes when we need it most. This foundation isn't about money. It's about remembering that one act of compassion can echo through an entire lifetime. My voice broke slightly. Ryan didn't save me with his wealth. He saved me with his belief. And now, every life we touch here is his story continuing. When I finished, the audience stood. Some were crying, others smiling through tears. And for a moment, I felt him there, not in body, but in spirit. Watching. Proud. After the event, Emma joined me on the balcony again, leaning her head against my shoulder. "You sounded amazing," she whispered. "Thank you," I said softly. I think he would have liked it. We stood there as the sun dipped low, the garden glowing gold beneath us. The tree in the center caught the light, its leaves shimmering like the world's quiet applause. I thought about how far I'd come from the woman who couldn't afford a meal to the one standing in a home built on gratitude. From shame to strength. From silence to purpose. I turned to Emma. "You know, baby, sometimes life has to fall apart before it can fall into place." She smiled. "And sometimes a stranger has to remind you who you are." I laughed, tears catching in my throat. Exactly. The wind carried the scent of rain again, gentle, clean, new. I closed my eyes and whispered into the breeze, "Thank you, Ryan, for everything." When I opened them, Emma was looking at me, her smile soft and knowing. "You okay, Mom?" I nodded. "Yeah, I'm home." The sun disappeared behind the hills, leaving the sky painted in pink and gold. The lights of the mansion glowed against the dusk, not a symbol of wealth anymore, but of grace. Because sometimes, the richest thing a person can leave behind isn't money. It's faith.